Hi, this is about the clinical NLP pipeline. So, what is clinical NLP? It's like NLP when where you automate the interpretation and prediction of text, but it's specifically with the goal of improving healthcare technology and healthcare outcomes, and therefore it's oftentimes trained specifically on clinical text. So, the pipeline, this is a generic NLP pipeline, but it applies to clinical too. So there's many stages: data acquisition, text cleaning, pre-processing, feature engineering, modeling, evaluation. And then there's a deployment and updating. I'm going to skip ML ops for this conversation for the sake of time. So we're going to talk about everything but the last few, which is ML ops. So starting with data acquisition, a lot of callouts that are specific to clinical text. Minority of clinical text is annotated, huge barrier for a lot of clinicians. So, for example, if you need annotations that show which part of the text are treatments or tests, like in this example down here, you might need a clinical person to validate or to annotate, and that's a lot of resources. Provenance. As of 2020, clinical notes available for research originated from mainly 9 medical institutions, but there's dozens out there, and some medical institutions have their own writing styles. This raises concerns of generalizability, so you need to take that into account when modeling. I'm going to skip HIPAA for the sake of time. So we talked about acquiring your data. Let's say you get your data, you're ready to clean it. So we're going to do text cleaning. Text cleaning involves, a lot of things, but let's focus on abbreviations and acronyms. A lot of text compared to general text, a lot of clinical text compared to general text has lots of abbreviations. And not only that, the abbreviations can have multiple meanings, which causes a lot of confusion for models. So take the word R, the letters RA. That could mean rheumatoid arthritis, renal artery, right atrium. So you need to what's called disambiguation. You have to disambiguate to improve model performance. So then pre-processing, similar text cleaning, but focused on certain parts of the process. So tokenization, stop word removal, and stemming and lemmatization. For the sake of time, I'm going to just mention briefly tokenization. There are certain words that shouldn't be broken out that normally would. Oftentimes because of special characters. So X-ray, for example, shouldn't remain as is. It should not be broken out into X and ray. So you need to account for things like that. Same thing for a stop word removal. You got to be careful with negation handling. So the word no will normally be a stop word that you remove. But for clinical NLP, that's an example of a word you would not want to remove because, for example, no chest pain versus chest pain, very different outcomes. Really important. So you need to be careful about your stop words and what you remove and what you don't remove. So now we have to talk about feature engineering. So you've processed your data, you're ready to do modeling almost, but feature engineering. Before deep learning, you would handcraft features such as the frequency of a word. Now with deep learning, you create what's called embeddings. And you're wondering what is an embedding? So look at this diagram here. I have a bunch of diabetes drugs on the right quadrant, and on the left quadrant I have aspirin, which is not diabetes. As you can see, an effective word embedding would be like this, where those diabetes drugs have their vectors that are very close together, and then aspirin's way off in a different angle. That's the kind of how these embeddings construct meaning, and it's really powerful. So one challenge, if you're going to use word embeddings, you need to make sure that they are trained on clinical data, not just generic data. So, for example, phenacetin, that was not an original Word2Vec released by Google, which is an embedding tool. But if you're doing clinical work, you would need that word in there. So you've got to fine tune to clinical corpora, not just general corpora. So then talking to modeling. So one point I want to make is that modeling, because we're doing deep learning these days, oftentimes your model, such as an example is here, Cyber BioGPT, a lot of them will do the embeddings for you and do the prediction that you're trying to do. So it can be kind of confusing. The feature engineering and modeling can get kind of blurry because sometimes the model does both. But the point is, you've got your features, you've got your word embeddings, you're going to do a model. Uh, which one do you get your models from? So just know that Hugging Face has some great resources if you're trying to find specifically NLP models trained on biomedical text. So I recommend Scilabert and BioBert if you're trying to do non-generative AI, such as like named entity recognition. If you're doing generative AI, I would recommend one of the GPTs. So BioGPT is a great example on Hugging Face, and I've shown where the models what data the models are trained from. Evaluation and then yeah, just evaluating performance. That's the last step I'm going to talk about. I'm going to skip ML ops. there's a lot of different things, a lot of different metrics specific to NLP problems, and it also applies to clinical NLP. So BLA, Rouge, Perplexity, very famous ones. Definitely still count in clinical NLP, not just regular NLP. But the one thing I want to say is these metrics, whether it's perplexity or F1 score, whatever you use, it doesn't fully account for patient safety and patient outcomes. So you can't just use one of these metrics. You also have to take into account holistically healthcare outcomes. And here are my references, and thank you.